In the 26 years, almost 27 years that I have been alive, I received one apology from my narcissistic parent. And even that, I don't know what the intentions were behind that apology. I have a sneaking suspicion that it was more a show than anything else, sort of an attempt for them to rekindle a relationship in the hope of regaining some semblance of control over my life or influence on my decisions, maybe. And it's really eye-opening to me when I look back at a lot of my experiences throughout my childhood, this in particular, not expecting or receiving an apology from my narcissistic parent. I remember early on in mine and my husband's relationship, anytime there was any kind of a disagreement or controversy, my default reaction was to get very defensive because I felt like whatever it was sort of a personal attack on me. And I think, looking back, I was just really scared of whatever might follow, of yelling, screaming, an argument, punishment, disconnection. I think so often for a lot of children of narcissistic parents, disagreement meant disconnection. And that's a really scary feeling, especially when you're a kid and the person that you don't feel connected to is your primary caretaker. And so I remember feeling very defensive in those moments as an adult. And I still remember, I don't think I'll ever forget it, the first time that I felt comfortable enough to apologize to my husband after a disagreement that we had where I was clearly in the wrong. But, growing up, not only was I encouraged to kind of take on this behavior, but it was also what I had witnessed for the majority of my childhood. And so I was kind of convinced that, okay, when a situation like this comes up, this is the way that you handle it. And that is, when there's a disagreement, you do not take responsibility. You are not held accountable for anything negative. You kind of pick your point and you stick to it. You're very firm in your stance, even if you have to tell a half-truth to kind of corroborate your story. There's no backing down. And I think, there are a number of different reasons, like I said, observing that kind of behavior throughout my childhood, sometimes being called upon to actually put that kind of behavior into practice. In addition, when I would be in the crosshairs of my narcissistic parent and I would be sort of prompted to defend myself, if I realized halfway through a disagreement that I had actually misspoken and I meant something other than what I said, I made a mistake. If I said that and I recognized that, then nothing that I said during that entire conversation would be valid. Because if I misspoke once, that meant that I could have been misspeaking the entire time. And so I think the mentality, it was really driven home that once you say something, once you sort of pick a stance, that's your stance. You have to live and die on that hill. And there was never any closure or forgiveness or apology that was ever expected. I never, no matter what hurtful things were said or done to me or to anyone else, was there any kind of closure. And I feel like that became my normal. I never even expected it. And looking back, that's the only way to really deal with conflict is it's healthy conflict resolution, to kind of address the problem, right? To recognize your part in it and to apologize for that and to make amends moving forward, especially if you care about the person that is involved, the other person that's involved, because you have a common goal of understanding and moving on. But I think for a lot of us who were raised by a narcissistic parent and grew up in that kind of a toxic environment, if there was any kind of a big blow up, an argument, a controversy, a disagreement, it would all just kind of explode and then end whenever our narcissistic parent was ready for it to end. And then they would go off and it would be quiet and no one would really know what to say or do. And then whenever they felt better, whenever they were over it and they had kind of moved on, it was expected that everyone else should be ready to move on now too. And it doesn't matter that there's no apology. It doesn't matter that, we haven't talked about the actual root of the issue. And we have no plan moving forward for how we can better handle this next time, right, in the future. We're just going to brush it under the rug and pretend like it never happened. And even worse, if you still felt upset or frustrated or overwhelmed, because experiencing something like that is all of those things, and you brought that up, then you were the target because you were dwelling on the past. Why can't you just forgive, forget, and move on? Life is too short to focus on the negative, right? And so you learn over time to just kind of suppress your true feelings, especially if they're a little bit more negative, and to never expect an apology. And so even in my first healthy relationship, I had a really hard time sort of letting that wall down and not being defensive and actually apologizing and unlearning that toxic behavior and teaching myself that, hey, in the face of controversy, especially when it's a person that you care about who's involved, it's the right thing to do to take responsibility, to hold yourself accountable for your part in this, and then to talk it out, to apologize for whatever it was that you said or did that might have hurt the other person, and then to make plans moving forward for how we're not going to do this again, so that the next time we're faced with a similar situation, we'll handle it a lot better for both of us. And so I remember apologizing, and I was so uncomfortable in that moment, but I remember thinking to myself, there's no two ways about this. I'm in the wrong here. And so I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And I was fully expecting for him to just pounce and for him to use that as basically me admitting guilt, right? And, oh, I told you, I knew it. See, and blaming me, holding me accountable, and really just rubbing my face in it. But instead, he was like, it's okay. Thank you. It blows my mind to this day because I remember that I had never experienced that kind of interaction, especially after a disagreement, and a disagreement where I was in the wrong, where I did something wrong, and then I took responsibility for it. It was a positive thing. And that completely just started to rewire my brain. And since then, dealing with conflict and controversy has been so much easier. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I am not a professional. I don't claim to be one, but a therapist once told me that I am an expert in my own experience. And I want to speak about these topics candidly so that anyone who has experienced or is currently experiencing something like it knows a little bit more about what to expect, how to respond, and that you're not alone.